UX to load times, devices to payments. A deep dive into localized player journeys.
Morning, everyone. My name is Kyle Wiltshire. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Testa, and I'm here to present from UX to load times, devices to payments, a deep dive into localized player journeys. Just quickly going over what we're going to cover here. First and foremost, the data we're going to look at today. What is Testa? Where does this data come from? Why should I actually listen to this information? We're going to cover the Philippines market. We're going to look at 6 operators here in the Philippines. We're going to also look at kind of the market demographics in general, technology, preferences, kind of have some takeaways from the market. After the Philippines, we'll look at Asia Pacific as kind of a whole and a region. Again, look at some of the market, technology, preferences, demographics there. Get into live dealer and slot game loading time benchmarks. Some takeaways from the region, and finally kind of some big picture conclusions for what Testa sees from Asia Pacific. So before I bore you with a whole bunch of numbers, what is Testa? Where does this data come from? We are a crowd testing company. So that means we have people in actual markets all over the globe. I think we're currently at 1,000 testers in 100 countries. So these are people that can test gaming products, websites, apps, etc. They're knowledgeable in the space. In-market testers around the globe, as I said. This was spun out of a technical consultancy I've run out of Taipei for the past 8-9 years. This data is our own research. We paid to have all the tests done. Anything that our clients commission from us, that's their own work. We wanted to go out and get this data, share it with you, lovely people here at SiGMA Asia this week. So Taipei is our headquarters. Asia is our backyard in terms of local markets. We've been doing some form of this type of testing for 8 years now. Testa itself has been in business for about 2. So, the Philippines market as it stands. Currently, record GGR, despite huge changes in the regulatory landscape. The POGO license was canceled last year, but the PIGO license is now growing. 2024 revenue of about 7 billion, that's a 25% growth. iGaming was about a 32% share. Just in the first quarter of this year, revenue is close to 2 billion, but iGaming is, I think, a 51% share, so you see what is driving that growth. There's been all sorts of little changes. PAGCOR has put into place less commissions for operators. Affiliates are now being accredited. B2B providers are now being accredited. And most importantly, the Philippines was removed from the FATF gray list. So just a better environment to see investment come into. The local market is thriving, and I think it could be a fantastic example for regulated gaming in Asia in the future. In terms of the actual demographics of the country, it is now 115 million people, which is wild. I lived here for quite a long time, and it was about 90 million, so it's grown quickly. A GDP per capita of about 4,400. That's kind of low for the region. It's on par with maybe Indonesia. A very, very young demographic. The median age in the Philippines is 26. That's very, very young. So a lot of the players you may be targeting are, early adulthood, middle age, kind of mid-20s. This makes them young, and maybe they aren't as wealthy now, but if you are to capture this player base, there's decades of growth ahead. For device preferences in the market, it is very driven by kind of low, mid-range Chinese Android phones. Apple doesn't even appear on this chart. In fact, the only provider here that isn't a kind of Chinese Android phone is Samsung at 10%. So less powerful devices, I think, is the takeaway. An average internet speed of 35 megabits, again, that's quite low for the region. Indonesia is similar, and we'll get into some of that data later. I think the big reason for that is simple. There's 7,000 islands in the Philippines. There's 14,000 in Indonesia. So these are not easy places to wire up with fiber optic cables. It's a lot of land. For payment methods, this is now an e-money market. If you're not doing Gcash or PayMaya, you're not surviving. These things absolutely exploded and came into the scene during the pandemic. This is basically the only payment channel that matters. Bank transfers, credit cards, there is some preference for them, but it's a minority compared to Gcash, Paymaya, etc. So e-wallets are king of the castle. So what we're going to look at here is 6 operators in the Philippines. We looked at 3 really key parts of the operator and player experience: registration, deposit, withdrawal. All of this has some sort of links into KYC. How we're going to do this is from the player's perspective. So how many fields were required, how many page clicks, how many numbers of attempts to upload an ID, etc., etc. How long did it take for me to get verified? And what we're going to come up with all of this is a score. Last month with Casino Compare, an affiliate here in the Philippines, we developed the Testa score for some of the Philippines operators. And what this essentially breaks down is, okay, based on how long this field took, or how long I had to wait, or how many retries, we're going to come up with a scoring metric to compare these 6 operators. So registration, deposit, withdrawal, KYC, how many fields, how long did it take. A score will map to basically how many hoops the player needed to jump through before they could get to their games, or get their money out, or what have you. In third place from the 6 we looked at, we have FBN eMotion, a score of 88, had a perfect registration score, 27 for withdrawal. That's because the number of input fields was about 6. Deposit, I think the most points were reduced for fund arrival time of 1 to 2 minutes. Now, if you're familiar with the European or North American markets, 1 to 2 minutes doesn't sound like long. In the Philippines and in the kind of e-wallet generation, mobile first everything, things can be instant. That is what you're competing with. So 1 to 2 minutes is actually, as we'll look at later, a bit behind some of the market leaders. So that was a reduction in score there. For KYC, they scored a 9. I think that was because, can't quite see the number there, just a bit under 2 hours for verification time, but there was no redos, so that was pretty strong. Desk Game came in at number 2, a registration score of 27, a perfect withdrawal score. Deposit, again, a bit of wait time there, so that took the fund arrival lead time down to 6, score of 24, and a KYC score also of 9. So that was our second place. And our first place out of the 6 was Casino Plus. Registration score of 30, perfect, withdrawal score of 30, deposit score of 27. The only thing they lost points for there was just the amount of pages the testers had to go through, and a KYC score of a perfect 10. And that is because the verification time was immediate, and there was no retries. So looking at all 6 here, we can kind of see strength and weaknesses, where they map, where they don't. Registration, generally not a lot of variation. In deposits, we saw as high as 28, as low as 22. Again, this is usually related to the wait time it took for the funds to come through. Withdrawal, again, similar variation. I think what really made the difference between the top 3 and the bottom 3 in this comparison was the KYC. So scores of 9 and 10 for our top 3. Bet88 and Crazy Win in this case had no KYC. That's an immediate 0 out of our scoring rubric. Play time, I believe it took a while for the KYC to be completed, and that took the score down. So I think the takeaway here, especially if you're familiar with the Philippines market, Casino Plus is one of the leaders commercially, and it's no surprise that having these processes absolutely dialed in is something that's important. Zooming out to Asia Pacific, a bit of the big picture here. So going to look at some of the demographics, internet connectivity amongst all these countries, device preferences, similar to what we did with the Philippines. We'll look at some Asia Pacific slots and live dealer benchmarks, compare them by country, compare them by provider, a few takeaways from the clients we've seen, and depending how I'm doing for time, we'll get into some bigger takeaways for Testa. We're looking at Korea and Japan, as well as Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. So you can see there's quite a lot of variation here. We were talking about how young the Philippines is earlier. That's quite similar for Malaysia. That's similar for Vietnam, India, all very young countries. East Asian markets, much older. median age of 55, 50 years old, 45, 50 years old. Much higher wealth though, 34,000 GDP per capita versus 35,000. Thailand, Malaysia, more higher GDP per capita in the Southeast Asia region. Indonesia and Philippines are maybe a bit more similar, same with Vietnam. India, even a bit lower. So you can kind of see, people like to say Southeast Asia as a market or a region. There's a lot of differentiation between these places. Just for the phones that each country uses, a ton of variation. In Korea, we see 70% Samsung, maybe not a surprise there, but a lot of mid and high-end phones, Android phones. Japan is now a very Apple-driven market, 60% Apple penetration, which is quite large. It's similar to like what they have in the US. The Philippines, we covered this earlier, mid and low-end Android phones, so much less power that's actually in the phone. People forget this is a handheld computer, so how strong that processor is going to vary a lot depending on kind of the range of the phone. In Thailand, we see about 30% with Apple, same in Malaysia. Indonesia looks mostly like the Philippines, a lot of low, mid-end Android, bit of Apple share there. Vietnam's interesting because it has similar GDP per capita as, say, Philippines or Indonesia, but there's actually a good amount of Apple share. India, again, a lot of mid, low-end Chinese phones. So knowing what devices the market is using is very important, just because how games are going to load, how much bandwidth they can consume, how fast they can chew through things. It depends on the device that is in their hand at the end of the day. So we're going to look at some game load times. I'm going to tell you kind of how we did it. We got crowd testers from Testa in 8 countries, 3 testers per country. They looked at slots and live dealer load times. We had multiple tests conducted so we could kind of average the data out. We measured by the game being playable. So there could be magic software stuff happening in the background where assets and music or whatever are still loading. The whole idea of these tests is the player experience. So when can I sit down and play the game? That's how we measured it. Very interestingly, from this batch of tests, we actually saw average load times were the fastest in Vietnam, which is not what one would expect. But I think a combination of maybe some stronger devices, faster internet connectivity, a lot of investment in infrastructure. Vietnam actually came out first for the slots test. Thailand, Korea, Japan, India, all kind of similar. We'll see as we get into Indonesia and Malaysia and Philippines again, this scales right out. So from the best of 13 on average to 31, quite a difference. We looked at a number of operators across a number of countries. This is a whole lot of data to put on a slide. You're welcome to grab it later. But one thing I'll kind of point out is some of the commercial market leaders are often in the top slots for how fast the games load. So, of course, being the fastest is not going to guarantee you market leadership, but I think it's very interesting that when you look at who the market leaders are, speed, UX is often something they've got dialed in. So we got Pragmatic there, we got B-Gaming there, show up a lot in these kind of fastest quartile, fastest few slots. Moving on to live dealer, looking at Vietnam, again, the fastest out of everything we saw. Thailand, Indonesia, Korea, India, all kind of a similar demographic there. Once again, the Philippines at the bottom. So a combination of internet speed, the devices used, a lot slower. So a similar distribution that we saw with slots. Again, looking kind of across a number of markets, we see that Evolution, Pragmatic, these guys are often in the top quartile in terms of speed, all quite comparable. We got a comparison here done by provider, Pragmatic, Azugi, Microgaming, Evolution, all pretty much neck and neck. Then we see it kind of scale out depending on the provider there. We got Live 88 next, and down at the bottom, Winfinity is about 27. So what Testa sees in the region, what our clients have requested. The biggest thing in Asia Pacific is probably payment testing for us. People want to know if the payment channels actually work. But we get a lot of requests for localization testing. So we don't do actual translations, but there's often the question of was the translation that I paid the dev shop for, was it translated well? Is the tone good? Would locals actually use this type of language? There's all sorts of insights that can be uncovered on things like this. bit of benchmarking, compatibility testing. I'm running out of time here, so I'll speed it up a little. Some takeaways from Asia Pacific. Southeast Asia is a mobile-only generation. I mean, we've talked about mobile first for a long time. This part of the world has basically skipped the desktop computer. The only computer in the house for many people is the mobile phone. So everybody is expecting things at TikTok-like speeds. There's no coincidence that the market leaders are often in the top rankings for speed and UX. We've got more of this data available on our website. Check it out at tested.io. We're upstairs as well at booth 2138. If you'd like to get some of this data in like a printable PDF, we're happy to do that for you. Just some conclusions from the big picture of what we see. These markets are very large and they continue to grow. Some are quite young, so they're posed for large growth over the next decade. Difficult markets to tackle, but if you get in now, I think you can really see the growth potential over the long term. Speed and UX matter in this part of the world a lot. Knowing which devices are being used, knowing what the infrastructure in the country looks like is very important. And Southeast Asia is just a handy geographical term. Southeast Asia is not a market. Things vary very wildly, depending on country, depending on where you're targeting and what the demographics are. Thanks for letting me speak to you today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.